Continuing chapter 5 of part 4. Upon their return, they found that the servant had recovered in that same hour. This wonderful cure is something. It stopped pain. It gratified and rewarded the centurion. But it was a small thing as compared with the saying of Jesus in utterance of a grand truth, which is to help the struggling hearts of truly religious men through all the ages. A truth is greater than a miracle. What Jesus said in the Mount Sermon is much more valuable to the world than what Jesus did among the diseased when he had descended from his lofty pulpit, but the latter have a historical connection and unity with the former. It was because of what was in him that Jesus spake and did his wonderful words and acts. Not far from Capernaum, a few miles to the south of Mount Tabor, on the northwest declivity of Little Hermon, commanding a wide view of the plain of Esdraelon and the northern hills, stands a village now called Nain, in the time of Jesus bearing the name of Nain. And we're bouncing this off of Luke 7:11 through 17. On the day after the healing of the centurion's servant, Jesus visited this place with his company of disciples and a great crowd attracted by his recent miracle. As he entered the town, he saw a funeral procession. It was the Jewish custom that all who met such a procession should join it and add their lamentations to the tears of the mourners. This was a particularly touching case. The corpse was that of a man stricken down in his youth, being the only child of his mother, who was a widow. He was being carried in an open coffin. When Jesus saw the mother's sorrow, his heart was moved. He stopped the barriers, and turning to the young man, he said, "I say unto thee, arise." And the dead sat up and began to speak, and Jesus delivered him to his mother. Here was an open meeting between death and the forces of life, with Jesus contained and directed. There was a crowd of spectators. There was no incantation. There was no prayer. There was no invocation of the help of another. Out of himself and by virtue of his own power and authority, Jesus said to a dead man, "I say, arise." There was no gradual recovery. The dead was alive, sat up, and began to talk. It was the collision of life force, the inertness of death, and the former prevailed. All such collisions are awful, but here was the additional element of extraordinariness. Usually, death conquered. Here, life was the victor. Great fear fell upon the people. Jesus had, at first, been a teacher, then a physician. Now he's a great prophet. Never since the days of Elisha had such a miracle been performed. For 9 centuries, the power of resurrection had been in abeyance. Now it had come back among men. In tones of awe, they said one to another, "God has visited his people." And the fame of Jesus spread through all the regions round about. So, see, it was the same thing that occurred with other figures. Everything about the Jesus story, the miracles and all this other stuff, it wasn't, oh, Jesus is the first one ever. No. But the contrast between the prayerful efforts of the prophets and the sublime authoritative call of Jesus must always be noticed. You know, how, right? It is set forth in a passage in Massillon's sermon, Sur la divinité de Jésus Christ, which is worth quotation for its great eloquence, finer in the original than I can give in translation, which, well-written stuff is like that. Elias raised the dead. Now, if you look at the Bible, that's the same case with everything except the book of Revelations. The book of Revelations is better in English than it is in Greek. It's the worst written Greek part of the Bible. Some of the other Greek is better sounding in English, or some of it's better in Latin. But it is true. But he was obliged to throw himself often on the corpse of the child he would resuscitate. He breathed hard, he drew himself together, he threw himself about. It is plain that he is invoking a power outside himself. Well, sometimes people may appear dead and then the Heimlich or something is performed, like some people even start going blue, and it's like, I wasn't sure there, but wanted to make sure that they, whether they could be saved or not, but unpuissance, Etrenger, that he recalling from the empire of death a soul that is not submissive to his voice, and that he is not himself the master of death and of life. Jesus Christ raises the dead, as he does the most common actions. He speaks as a master to those who are slumbering in the eternal sleep. It is quite apparent that he is the God of the dead as well as the living, but always the most serene when he is performing the grandest deeds. No. But that wasn't the case with the others that did that. Now we're going to bounce something off the castle of Machaerus, John in prison, Luke 7:18 through 35, Matthew 11:2 through 18. While Jesus was thus increasing in popular attractiveness and enlarging his field of operations, his friend John lay pining in the castle of Machaerus, next to Jerusalem, the best fortified place in the Holy Land. It was near the summer residence of Herod in Paris, into which he had been thrown by Herod Antipas because of his bold denunciation of that tetrarch's crimes and public scandals. John had hailed Jesus as the coming one, the anointed, the deliverer. 16 months had passed since the inauguration of Jesus, and as yet John had not heard that he had begun to perform such messianic acts as the Jews looked for in the deliverer. From a national blaze of reputation, John had suddenly gone down into the gloom of a dungeon.